All right, so let's move on. I've got another top. The next topic was around just sort of where we see enterprises struggle. Let me sort of share. Let me see if I can share this with you guys. I just pulled a couple of, literally I just clipped these today, and these are all within, I don't know, the last couple of months. Tech Radar talking about, despite the hype, most AI projects are stuck in the sandbox. And the bottom right one, AI tools are a game changer, but these reliability issues are a problem. Very few know how to keep it. I thought it was funny, keep it from falling over. BCG is at the bottom of this quote. So it talks about, overall AI maturity hasn't moved beyond the experimental stage. This was an article in like April. This another one from Wall Street Journal. Companies are struggling. So, you guys are talking to large companies all the time. Do you agree? And then if so, like, where are they getting sort of hung up? Jim, maybe kick this one off for us.
The title of those articles, or the tagline in those articles, to me exactly tie into, or at least sort of reflect some of the issue. And it's not an AI project. There's a business problem or a business opportunity. That's where it needs to start. And if you're starting with something saying this is an AI project, you high potential that you're starting. Yeah, you've got a hammer in your hand and you're looking around for a nail. And we see large enterprises that are literally doing dozens and dozens of proofs of concept and experiments. And it's bluntly, we've spoken with many clients where when we come in and start a conversation around the business process, the business problem, and by the way, it doesn't always have to be a business problem. It may be something that's operating fine today, but it's still a business opportunity because of what AI can enable. So you don't want to just sort of say, oh, where are your business problems? But it's got to start there. And then it's, hey, we've got this awesome new thing that we never had before, that we can apply and do things that we never could do before. And let's look at it through that lens. And again, sort of the taglines of those, this is an AI project. No, this is hey, let's go out and grow our revenue in this space, or we need to drive efficiency in our supply chain, or we need to, sort of give ourselves a way to look at the market and gain new insights in the market and where we want to apply our marketing muscle. It starts with those kind of conversations and how can we apply AI to it. And I think that's the vibe, if you will. Go back to the vibe coding. We need to sort of get the conversation inverted.
I would throw a few things out there in addition to that. I agree with all of that. One I see, and it sort of varies from company to company. One scenario I see a lot, whereas companies are like, yeah, we've got to do some stuff with AI. And then you sort of ask them questions like, oh, okay, so, where are you guys getting started? What are the ground rules? What tools are you using? And so on. They're sort of all just sort of stare at each other, and like, well, we're really not supposed to put stuff in ChatGPT. And, you tell them, well, have you turned off the personal data collection? And they all open up their app on their phone. They quickly go and sort of try, like, okay, we're starting at the beginning.
Background.
Yeah. Like, oh gosh, okay, cool. Or you sort of see a little bit of that, or you see what I call sort of the AI prevention department. And any project that comes in, and we see a lot of IT organizations are the AI prevention department where they don't want another tool. They don't want to be the ones that get in trouble for, their code leaking out into some large language model and so on. And they just sort of lock stuff down. And there's sort of just a great deal of fear, I think, without sort of understanding sort of the opportunity. So those are some of the big things I see.
I
besides
think the key thing I see with that too, Pete, on the AI prevention thing, there's some good concerns backing that up.
Sure.
By the AIs, they're right to have some concerns, but it's one of those areas where trying to shut it down is the least secure option. Because what
everybody's
like
going to do
because the second these tools are so valuable right now. The second you don't have a corporate endorsed approach for how to use these tools, everyone's just going to use their own personal ChatGPT to do it, and then that is literally the worst way to do it, right? And so and so you feel like, oh well, I'm being conservative. We're taking this approach. That's the low risk way. I actually argue that's the highest
Right.
risk thing
I
almost
agree.
to do. It's much
Yeah.
better to recognize that these tools just have way too much value to keep out of people's hands, and to
Yep.
have, the right, have a the right way to do it, that, and there's all sorts of ways
And to
out there
promote
now.
that, this
Yeah,
is
Yeah,
how
and
we
to
want to
promote
do
it.
it here,
That's
sure.
as
right.
opposed
Well,
to just sort of trying to hold it all at bay,
and
sort of thing.
this stuff is so exciting, right? I mean, that it gets everybody's juices flowing, and everybody wants to bring their thing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for the whole RAG pattern, right? The retrieval generation
Yeah.
pattern for searching dark data, that came about because of a demo that OpenAI did that was showing you how you could take a model that was trained before something happened and teach it about that thing so it could answer questions. It was the Olympics, the Winter Olympics in 23, I think it was. So what was really interesting there is that pattern, everybody saw that and said, oh my God, I can light up all of my enterprise data using that pattern, right? And then they stayed in that pattern for a year and a half and tried to use it for everything, like searching databases and examining analytics, and it really went sideways. And that same thing is kind of happening with vibe coding now. Everybody's looking at it saying, oh, I don't need to buy a platform. I don't need to build some special thing. I can just vibe code this and turn it on over the weekend, and I'll have my own version of it. It's just prompts, right? It's just prompts, that, as they say.
Right.
And so this it sort of gets enterprises into trouble, because you end up being able to show something really quickly, but it's like trying to go to the moon by going up a mountain, right? You'll get closer.
Right.
You get closer every step you take, right? But then eventually you're going to realize you need a rocket. And so, the kind of things that I run into all the time, working with customers, is they basically are looking at the block diagrams and saying, well, there's a database, I've got that. There's an enterprise chat window, I can do that. That's my portal. There's an LLM, I can just use one of those that I've found over here. I'll just wire all that up, and here we go.
Exactly.
Right?
And I'll be done.
And I'll be
AI
done. Exactly right. And the problem is, I like to explain, the complexity is in the lines between those things, right? The language model needs things done a very special way and tracked and audited, because it can make mistakes, and the human needs things that are reliable and true, and they're very trusting because it's an IT platform, right? The database definitely needs things done a very special way, and it is prone to error, right? So the vibe coding works to get you to that kind of, not even a 1.0 demo, to a 0.1 demo, right? And then everybody can do that over the weekend, and it really looks like it's something that you just ought to be able to pound out in a couple of weeks, and then it ends up taking a lot more, which is kind of why some of these troubles come up.
We do see, I think one of the things is people have really latched on to the RAG approach as sort of a, look, IT organizations, they're really struggling with, how do I manage all this infrastructure? How to do it safely? How do I not, they have all these challenges. And so when they see a thing that works that's as magical as RAG, it's like, oh, here's the thing. I've added AI everywhere, and I'm good, right? Yeah. And I think that we're seeing that a lot, right? That to hammer everything's a nail, and they don't go. And what we're finding is, to really drive a lot of value, you got to go deep into these use cases to do the things you're talking about, Mike, right? To provide all the right context in all the right places, to do things and use the tool in a way that adds value in your domain, for your company, that reflects your strategy. It's work to do that. It's not just sort of add sort of this layer on top. I think we see that in a lot of places.
The reason it got so much attention is because it takes unstructured and makes it structured. And so so you put in Coke and you put in Pepsi, and you're going to get out a fixed thing, a thing that you can then put in a database that you can track, right? The problem is Coke and Pepsi are almost identical in there, even though in the real world we know that they're very different things, very different.
Quite different.
They're almost identical because they're brands of dark colas, right? What were my sales in Brazil last year is almost exactly the same thing as what are my revenues going to be in Mexico next year. It's literally almost exactly the same thing in the RAG world. But the IT affinity for it comes from the fact that it takes either one of those questions and makes it look the same, ready to go in a database, ready to go in a search, right? So it takes me out of the business of worrying about that messy text, and all of a sudden it's numbers, and I'm comfortable.
And it's super useful depending on the scenario, right?
Absolutely.
It's just not the tool for everything, right?
Right.
Jim,
exactly
what
right.
you look like you were going to add?
Well, there were sort of two ads. First of all, back to your AI prevention department. Certainly IT can play a role in that, and the hype. IT is maybe least immune to the hype because they may view it as a threat to a domain they've owned. We're sort of creating a new server in a closet here with AI that is way more than the old server in a closet that IT was worried about. So that's one thing, sort of getting control of it. But they're also not immune to the hype cycle from a standpoint of interest. They're super interested in developing personal skills. They see it even in some cases as a threat to jobs and careers. So they want to lean into it heavily and sort of get control of it. There's certainly other issues related to compliance in certain organizations where this is sort of a meaningful, talking about how the AI is going to be used, super meaningful. Legal concerns over, protecting corporate the company's IP and the company's data, all of that I don't want to diminish. One other sort of interesting thing where we talk about enterprises struggling, and I'm going to maybe draw a distinguishing line between large cap companies or clients of ours and mid caps. We do run into a lot of companies there that are actually just beginning this journey. And depending on sort of how they're thinking about it or their maturity, it's sort of a question of just, well, how do I roll out AI? Like they're rolling out another Microsoft Office. And
exactly.
You got to sort of totally flip the script on that discussion. This isn't just sort of roll out AI. This is an opportunity to think about the way we do business. Now, the beauty of that, the mid-cap client or the smaller client in that case, the opportunity for them to become AI first at speed throughout the enterprise and do that in a meaningful way, I think this presents a channel or an opportunity for them to maybe leapfrog some of their larger competition in a way that's almost never existed before. So that's a great discussion to have.
And we've talked a little bit about why do we think they're struggling? Probably haven't talked enough about okay, so what do I do about it, Jim? Let's maybe go around the horn, Jim. What's your quick advice of here's how you get back on track?
Well, it depends on it depends on sort of the company and where you're off track, bluntly. I think one of the first things I would say is really sort of a little bit of self-discovery here and honesty as to whether or not you have all the skills you need in-house. And there's sort of three answers to that. Yes, I do, and I'm confident of that. Okay. No, I don't, and I'm confident of that. Well, then let's go figure out how you're going to get those skills. Or I'm unsure if I do. And bluntly, if you're unsure if you do, you're probably in the no, you don't camp. So let's think about, how you're going to attack it. And then sort of, okay, you're there, but let's think about sort of what are the topics that we want to address. I think some of the big topics you want to think through are, okay, how are we going to enable, Stu talked about this, how are we going to enable our workforce in a controlled way at an individual productivity level? And people can make huge strides in their individual productivity without sort of having to get agreement or process alignment or whatever, just doing what they're doing today. That's the thing. Okay, separately, how do we want to think about this, not in terms of individual productivity, but in terms of the enterprise and what we do? And let's think through the use cases. Where can we get value out of this? And also, where can we how do we get there quickly? What's the viability? What's the reasonableness of this? AI is not going to do everything for you, but there is a scenario here where you can do things with your business that creates a flywheel where a use case creates some value. When I say value, I mean real value, a material dollar value, and funds the next one and the next one. So I think there's sort of some different categories to think through of how you want to apply AI.
Yeah, I would probably pile on to a lot of what you said. One, I'd say if you don't have a proactive strategy to be advocating for AI inside of the company and pushing sort of an AI first strategy, you probably have an AI prevention department, right? So first sort of get proactive in terms of bringing it into the enterprise and give people like, all right, here's how we do it, right? And you can do it the right way to Stu's point, because otherwise you're going to probably end up in the worst possible scenario. And then stop thinking about it as this thing you sort of apply, AI spreading peanut butter, AI everywhere is sort of going to achieve some goal. It's very much very use case specific, I think, and you got to sort of think about it in those ways. Okay.
And I think
go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, I mean, to a certain way, you have to think about the raw AI, right? So when we just talk about a particular model like GPT-5 or Claude 4.1 or whatever, you really have to think of it as like this really, really smart, college student, could be even PhD level, like college student, but, who has a really bad long-term memory, or really bad short-term memory,
sort of no long-term memory,
and no context at all about your business outside of what you could learn from the internet, right? And so where I think most failures tend to happen when you try to do really meaningful work, right? Just pick it up off the ground, like giving the tools to the right people, or to people to enhance their personal productivity is actually harder to do than it sounds, to get people to use it right, train it right, do it right. We touched some of those things, but that's pretty straightforward stuff. But when you try to get it to do like really meaningful work in your business, you've got to, realize you have this incredible intelligence capability, but you can't apply the intelligence until you've provided it with the right information. Which, you hear this context engineering buzzword around, but it's a buzzword for a reason. Until you really understand, until you can give this super intelligence the right understanding of your business, put things into perspective, help it understand the way, your terminology. What do you mean by, churn? That's actually lots of different companies define that in a different way. Where is that data stored? There's a lot of information. If you just plucked, someone randomly off of the Stanford campus, right? There's an enormous amount of information you'd have to provide that person in order for them to just do a task immediately in your organization. And that's where people, that's hard work. Sure. It'd be a hard work to pull the Stanford grad off and get them up to speed, and it's hard work to get this LLM.
Exactly.
There's this powers of 10 thing.
Well said.
There's a powers of 10 thing going on here, which is if I do back of the envelope math on the use cases that we've encountered, I think AI tokens are worth about 1,000 times what you pay for them. Right. So that's 10 with 3 zeros. That's roughly the value they have. Right. And I can back up that statement with, lots of different examples. And so if it's 1,000 to 1, you probably better look at whether or not your business can get that goodness. Right. That's just motivation to get unstuck. So then the next step is, all right, what kind of problem? And Jim, you've got a whole playbook on what kind of problem. But I love something that the Manus guys put out, which is a great benchmark we've started applying. And that's roughly that for every one thing you tell, for every 100 things you tell an LLM, it's going to do 1 unit of output work. And so what does that mean? Well, if you have a 100-page manual for how to do a job, an LLM is going to apply the 1 correct page to that job when it's time to do it, right? It's 100 to 1. And you don't want it to do something the way it learned on the internet that you ought to do that, right? You want to give it the 100 pages for your business and have it choose the 1 right page to do it, right? So 1,000 to 1, 100 to 1. And then the last point is, at least what I see, working with a few different job categories internally for us and with customers, about 10 to 1 is the speed at which the machine can do something compared to a human once it's really ready to do that job, right? So if you just think of those powers of 10, I mean, you got to get off the dime, right? And then it's a whole separate challenge. Instead of saying no, it's how to say yes, right?